Hello and welcome to the latest webinar from Cloud Assess. We hope you enjoy.
Okay then everyone, good afternoon. This is Rob from Cloud Assess here. I'll just stick my camera on. Phil, have we got you? Do I need to unmute you? There we go. Does that work?
Yes,
mate?
thanks for that, mate. I was just wondering how that was going to work.
Yeah, we've got the technology. We've got the technology. It's all right. So sorry for the last minute mess around with the screen there. Can everyone see my screen? Can you see the screen there, Phil?
All good.
That's good. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We've got a pretty good turnout today, actually. So it's obviously a pretty hot topic, and yeah, one that we can hopefully stir up a bit of debate and conversation around. So, bit of a fresh title, but how to keep it real online. I'm probably a bit out of touch to keep it real these days, but even so, we can have a go, I think. Phil, yeah, I've got joining me today Phil, who will do the introductions with in a second, but just a couple of slides really just to get us in a good space and explain where we're at and what we're doing. So yeah, we're going to use the chat function today to keep it real. So, yeah, thanks Bernie, that's good. Yeah, so we're going to be getting through a few things, but just a slide now just to test the chat function, and I've got to find that chat function. Yep, so we've got a few numbers going up on the screen, which is good. So there's going to be a fair bit of chat interaction today. Really keen to get people involved, use that chat function, share experiences. We have got a space for Q&A at the end. I'm sure people will be keen to dig into and get the benefit of Phil's experience as a very experienced vet professional that he is. Yes, I'll answer a couple of questions now. You will get a copy of this presentation and a link to the video in an email at the end. And if you want a certificate of attendance, we have a survey at the end to know, so we know who rocked up and who would like a certificate. So please take the time to just answer 3 or 4 questions. We've got a live transcript as well. Thanks, Kin, for making that request. So if you want to get the benefit of the captions, please switch that on. It's somewhere in your options on the bottom. So yeah, if you want a certificate or a digital badge, then please answer the survey. The survey is a great way to give us feedback as well of what sessions you'd like to see run in the future. So, so that's a good way of steering the debate for the next session. Next section, we'll just have a go at a poll to see who's who in the zoo while we keep talking, and we'll see who we've got in the room and share that information in a second. But while that's going, big trainer and assessor contingent coming through today. We'll just get the boring bit and the introductions out of the way. So Phil, maybe I can hand over to you and you can give us a bit of your background.
Yeah, definitely, Rob. Thanks so much for inviting me along again for a chat. Love coming and talking with the Cloud Assess team on all things digital assessment and digital overall. I'm still doing the poll. I'm trying to work out which of these ones I'm supposed to be ticking, mate.
Oh, I didn't make a special box for you. Yeah.
I'll choose other. I want to do all of the above. In terms of my background, it's great to see so many familiar faces and names here today. We've got a great group that the Cloud Assess team have pulled together again. My background, I've been in the sector now about, I think this is my 23rd year, 24th year. I don't want to talk about that too much. I came in the late 90s, and I have obviously education background. Some of you know I'm primary school trained originally, don't hold that against me. So generalist educator that made the shift into vet. And I picked up pretty early that there was this digital thing going on. We didn't talk much about it being digital back then, but I jumped into a master's in 99, which had a specialisation in e-learning. So jumped into the e-learning sort of digital space pretty quickly. And from there, 2001, installed my first learner management system. We might talk about that in a minute. And over those 20 years, run and owned my own RTO, worked with hundreds and hundreds of other RTOs, qualified auditor, worked with regulators, ran an IT company, sold off some software from that one as well, and have had, I think, 3 or 4 consultancies along the way and different consultancy businesses. So I've been around a little while, and I love, the guys know that I love talking about digital learning and what's coming up with digital. So again, Rob, really pleased that you've made given me the opportunity to come back and have a talk again about all things digital in the vet sector.
No, that's great, mate. And yeah, we really appreciate you coming along. Just as a bit of an FYI for the audience, Phill gives up his time free of charge, essentially, to give us the benefit of his insight and experience and background. But yeah, I'll just do a little plug for his Vet PD series. You know, there's loads of PD available on the vetr website and the vetr, what would you call it, interface? I'm not sure, portal. But yeah, go and have a look at all the great content that's on there. Have a look. It's all very reasonably priced and sourced from a huge range of industry experts. So it's a really good space to go and have a look and see if there's anything that can suit your business or your team and get the benefit of. So I'll put the link in the chat for everyone to have a look. But if you want to catch that later, I'll put the information in the chat in the Q&A session as well. In terms of my background, I'm also passionate about online and digital, as Phill is. We crossed paths in, I think it was about 2012 or 13 when we pretty much launched Cloud Assess. And me and Phill had a bit of a chat and kind of, you know, we've been talking ever since. But yeah, Cloud Assess I used to have an RTO myself, and we identified a requirement for just having a smarter way of gathering evidence to substantiate competency judgments. And we recognized that paper was impractical, you know, it just wasn't streamlined, efficient, or didn't give us the outcomes we were after. So we created a solution when we couldn't find one, and the rest, as they say, is history. So we've continued to grow and invest in the product to create a very committed and dedicated product to the vet sector that really focuses on all the kind of assessment practices that you'd associate with vet, whether it's third-party reports or practical observations or logbooks or record books or whatever it might be. So we like to profess that we can create any type of assessment, and then there's loads of compliance features there. But yeah, we're continuing to push hard in the vet space, and hopefully you'll continue to. Everyone here is interested in the digital space, and that's a pretty hot topic as well. But I won't drown you in detail on our backgrounds there. I think that's the boring stuff out of the way. I'll just share the poll before we trudge on. So we'll see. We've got a great attendance from trainers and assessors today. Can you see that, Phill?
Nice. Yes, I can.
Yeah,
good mix though.
That's great. So a few others in the room, 17 others. We'll let them have an air of mystery about them. But yeah, good to see a good compliance turnout and management turnout as well. But that's interesting to see the demographics of who's in the room. So thanks everyone for answering that. Okay, we'll crack on to the agenda then, Phill. So Phill and I had a chat, it'll be a couple of months ago, I guess, with the team that coordinate these events down here at Cloud Assess, and we kind of had a bit of a parley about what we were going to cover and what hot topics were, and really a big one is the TAE and some of the skill sets that are emerging there, and some imminent kind of changes there, which is good. But we wanted to brush upon kind of the online piece and what's changed and what we've learned, some key learnings before we get into that. And then we can break into the facilitate e-learning kind of unit or what have you to kind of break down that and see what different people are doing, what different practices we might be able to share, what experiences we've got, and how that can kind of contribute to a greater conversation. Have you got anything you'd like to add on there, Phill?
No, that's a great summary, Rob. I think hopefully there's a good mix here for the group around some information around the TAE, the stuff that's coming, and stuff that's coming soon. Not so much the TAE 22. We're not talking about that today, and also, as you mentioned, a whole range of tips and tricks along the way as well.
Yeah, great. So in terms of the online space. Maybe I'll make a start with the first one, Phill, if that's all right. Yeah, the online stroke remote myth. This is a recurring theme for conversations with myself and Phill, but there still seems to be a large contingent of people out there that have a misconception about the online space and what that really enables or provides for in the vet space or in any kind of learning and assessment space. And what we regularly see is an association with remote work for online, whereas digital or online assessment can still be delivered face to face and deliver significant business improvements, efficiency improvements, and quality controls. Have you got anything to expand on that, Phill?
I think that's a really good overview, Rob. I just add, I often talk about the change in our delivery mode reporting. So 1st of January 2018, the government changed the way we all report our data or our student enrolments. And we've got 3 options now. We've got internal on campus, we've got external somewhere else, or we've got workplace where the students are studying at work. The one that the government removed was electronic based. For those of you in records that have been around a little while, you remember we used to have this electronic based mode. Our government now recognises that all of our delivery modes include digital, include some kind of technology or resource that's supporting the delivery regardless of where the students are. So I often use that example because we know how slow government is. If government have already worked it out, 4 years back, then we should all sort of get over this discussion about remote students. That's not what it's about. It's about how we're using technology and digital learning practices to support all of our students in all of the delivery modes in all of their programs.
Sorry, just responding to a message there. Thanks, Phill. Yeah. So at least we've got some recognition that the electronic is just kind of a media rather than a mode, I guess, in the new space. And then strategic reviews. There's been more strategic reviews than a shift in government, I think, recently. But it seems to be some pretty consistent themes across some of the reviews of online and the impact of that over the last couple of years, I would say, to be short. But there seems to be a recurring theme around training and support, and certainly needing to cater to different capabilities and experiences and demographics. Have you got any direct experience you want to share with that, Phill?
Well, I think the regulator, talking specifically there, we're thinking about the Commonwealth regulator, ASQA's strategic review for online learning. And I think in some respects, I wouldn't like to say we're still early adopters, but it sort of feels like that a little bit, that there were many organisations that jumped into online for the first time 2 years ago. And in some cases, even if digital delivery isn't the preferred main mode, it had to be the predominant delivery mode, if you like. So there was a lot of activity very quickly, some of it good, some of it not so good. And the regulator put out some information at the time and has progressively tried to clarify and provide more guidance, educative information about what we can and can't be doing, what we should be doing. But having said that, this review is really in the first instance, trying to find out what actually happened. And if you look at the last Insights paper, I think there's been 3 Insights papers now, and the 3rd one came out in the last couple of weeks. And it's really still talking about the data and talking about the feedback that the providers are telling the regulator what we actually did. So there's lots of activity going on, but it does sort of still feel like we're early in the process in understanding what happened and what the profile of current digital delivery is in the vet sector, so that then we can then perhaps go a step beyond that and start talking more about what is best practice or what is good practice, what are evidence-based activities that you should be engaging in with your students.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach, and I think that's probably part of the strength of the vet system, is it's never prescribed in terms of you must do this if you're doing this type of learning or training and assessment strategy. So, you know, interpretation of the units and putting that into play is kind of down to each RTO or individual organisation. So, you know, I wouldn't want to see anything too restricted, but it's certainly been a big learning experience for everyone in the sector, I think. And having to change is never a comfortable thing, but when there's a bit of pressure to make these changes quickly for the need of the students in the sector, I think it's been an interesting time, and there's certainly been a lot of learning points for the different use cases and scenarios that we've seen. Okay, mate. And then you came up with some really good examples when we had our chat about online classroom compliance and just some of the kind of analogies or kind of scenarios you've come across that really I hadn't thought about, but are obvious when you bring them up and kind of explain those scenarios.
Yeah, I think, again, there's been such a huge shift into this online virtual classroom space. And perhaps we can clarify that a little bit as well, because you can talk about a webinar and then a workshop, a virtual workshop, if you like. Is it just a live stream kind of activity that we do like we're doing right now, where there's a little bit of interactivity, a bit of a chat, maybe some polls? Or are we going into more of a workshop sort of online classroom mode where the students have got breakout rooms, they're working together, they're actually involved in tasks, needing to report back, completing activities and reporting back? So more of that traditional classroom environment. There's been a lot of providers obviously jumping into that space again for the first time in the last couple of years. And there's some areas that are really starting to emerge from that slumber in terms of things that the providers haven't thought about. And I want to mention a couple of those in a minute. But just before I do, I should mention as well, when we're talking about the new TAE units in a little while, there's an expectation of both synchronous and asynchronous. So what we're talking about is there's an expectation that there's live activity as we are right now, if you're not on the replay, hi guys, and also and supporting activity that is happening perhaps individually by the student whenever the student wants to do it, and how you're supporting that kind of activity as well. So within the overall student experience, we're still trying to focus and make sure that there's appropriate practice and skills across both live and asynchronous activity. A couple of things that it's been emerging, and again, I had this conversation, believe it or not, yesterday. I was talking to a provider and they were talking about Microsoft Teams, and they said, oh, you know, we run all of our classes in Microsoft Teams. I said, oh, that's cool. How are you doing your evidence of participation? How are you downloading your attendance records out of Microsoft Teams, MS Teams? And started the provider sort of step back a bit, and they said, oh yeah, we probably should be taking attendance for those sessions. So like, well, yes, you're required to take attendance for sessions. So things around the evidence, the record keeping that we're keeping, whether it's a one-on-one meeting or whether it's a group session, in Zoom or Teams or whatever technology you're using, with providers are starting to realise, hang on a minute, we're supposed to have been keeping particular records of these things. And NCVR, if you're a subsidised or funded provider, you be acutely aware that NCVR has issued evidence of participation guidelines. They're built into subsidy or funding contracts across multiple states and territories, what records you need to keep if you're doing this kind of delivery or this kind of delivery or this kind of delivery. But what some providers might not realise is that those guidelines are for every RTO in the country. They're actually issued by NCVR, and it's a requirement for every provider to be able to retain and then demonstrate those records at audit. So I think this area of evidence participation is a bit of a challenge in the first instance. From there, another two that I want to pick up, one is electronic signatures, using electronic signatures in digital delivery. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but most providers that we're working with when we're doing internal reviews, audits, etc. They're not using electronic signatures correctly, or they don't have the processes in place to justify the use of electronic signatures. So that's another one that seems to be a challenge that might bite providers down the track. And then one that's only just sort of come up in the last couple of months with a couple of clients with work is around working with children checks. So if you're a provider that's working with students under the age of 18 years, as many providers do, they're minors, they're children under the age of 18 years, and you're required to have a child safe framework in place, and you're required to have working with children checks. The challenge or the emerging area is where you're doing cross-border delivery. So when we all went digital sort of 2 years ago, when there was that big jump in, I've found a couple of providers that have started using team members across borders. So they might have their Victorian working with children check, but all of a sudden they're delivering online to students in New South Wales because there was an efficiency there, because all of a sudden we're all doing from home or dialing in. But there's some challenges around if you're doing cross-border delivery, where you do or don't need to hold a working with children check in each of those jurisdictions. So it's not just face-to-face physically, online delivery, face-to-face delivery like we're doing right now, video-based delivery with minors is absolutely a strong interest of the child safe frameworks across the country. So that working with children area, if you're a provider that is starting to use personnel across multiple jurisdictions, you probably want to have a really close look at that one as well.
Yeah, thanks, Phill. That's fantastic. And then the last point on there before we move on to kind of the TAE stuff is just trainer and assessor training, and it's definitely again a recurring theme of some of the ASQA reports and studies that we probably took for granted. You know, everyone's been working with paper for years, and you know, we don't even think about training someone on how to use it. You know, you're sketching on paper from from cradle to the grave, so to speak. But we pushed everyone in a digital space, and I think sometimes maybe we just expect that people are just going to know what they're doing. But it seems like a theme that's definitely picked up as requiring some attention is kind of helping people make this transition to online and recognizing some of the development requirements for not just I suppose the trainers and assessors, everyone involved, and we'll talk about support and things like that later on. But yeah, have you got some direct experience there or anything to kind of build on that point?
Yeah, it's obviously a challenge we've all felt, and it's a good one to call out because there's some pain associated with this as well, depending on your approach, how you want to look at it. But you reminded me of the Udemy, the latest workforce trends report that Udemy has released globally. They're saying in the last 5 years, the number one skill in HR L&D is around online course creation. That's been the most popular skill worldwide. And in the next 5 years, they're saying that, it's going to be the top area. So this whole area of being able to create course experiences and resources for online before we actually think about facilitating them as well is a really hot button one. From our regulators' perspective, obviously our Commonwealth regulators have been highlighting that there's a trainer and assessor capability challenge. They've been talking about that for years, predates the pandemic a long way, and we've all got our own views about whether how accurate or not that might be. But this whole area of digital has sort of doubled down on that now. So we do need providers and vet practitioners to have a whole range of digital skills that they might not have needed 5 years ago. And even if we might be trying to avoid them at the moment, we're definitely, if we want to stay employed, we're definitely going to be wanting to be using them in a few years' time. So I think it is a big challenge. There's lots of, and the system, if you like, the skills service organisation, the industry reference committee have been looking to try and deal with that with vet products that we're going to be talking about in a minute. But I think there's just a whole range of little skills and things that we need to be learning that that don't necessarily need to be formal training, but they're just that ongoing professional development. I'll give you just really quickly, I'll give you a great example. In the last 2 days, I've learned how to turn HD high definition off on my Zoom calls. And you might, have you ever thought about that you can actually up and down the signal strength of Zoom and the bandwidth that requires? Why did I learn that? Because I was in a situation and I was talking with someone else who was also in this situation where they were using metered bandwidth. They were on an internet connection that was actually limited. It wasn't unlimited. So the more that the Zoom call takes in that bandwidth and those megabytes, the more they've got to pay at the end of the month. So there's just even little things like that for particular contexts, particular target groups that you want to think about. And that doesn't require a skill set or a unit of competency. It just requires an understanding of who your target group is and what the challenge is, and then how can you go about addressing that challenge.
Yeah, that's right. I think it just needs careful thought and considerations to all your processes and how they're going to change by operating in a different space. And it's quite easily an oversight in the rush to adopt technology or deliver a new experience. So thanks for that, Phil. That's good. Maybe we'll keep moving because we've got plenty to get through yet, and there's pretty much half an hour left of the main content. So we just wanted to share some information about the delivery learning skill set and some of the current and kind of imminent options in terms of the TAE that are going on there. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be well versed in this, which is why Phil's here. So maybe you could help us really understand what's going on in this space, Phill.
Yeah, just quickly, a couple of things there in the chat talking about teams and attendance. Have a look when you get a chance. Just Google NCVR evidence of participation. It will give you the non-financial audit guidelines. And grab your attendance record from whatever system you're using. I'm not trying to say Teams is great or not great. Just whatever system you might be using, download the NCVR evidence of participation guidelines that specify exactly what needs to be on that attendance record to be acceptable at audit, and then have a look at the records that your system is giving you. And does your system, does it tick off all of those things? It's got the date, it's got the trainer's name, it's got the unit of competency code, it's got, if it's electronic delivery, there's other things that it needs as well. So just have a bit of a look at that and see if you can tick off everything that's the minimum requirement as part of those guidelines. Particularly important, as I mentioned, if you're a subsidised or funded provider, you're going to find that that's perhaps much more closely looked at by your state or territory funding partner than contractual partner than perhaps what the Commonwealth regulator might do at a regulator audit. But something just to check it out there. In terms of the TAE options, that was a great segue in there too, Rob. So there's a couple here. There's two key units that we wanted to talk about. There's the facilitate e-learning and design and develop e-learning resources. Now, you guys, I'm sure if you've been around a while, you'll recognise that those units are old. So the facilitate e-learning is a classic one. They first came out in 2004. And I'm not sure there's been too much work done to them since. There's been a few little updates here and there over the years as the TAE training package has been updated, and obviously as we moved into the new unit of competency format and assessment requirements. But they're still pretty much the same in terms of the outcomes as what they were in 2004. That first skill set there, delivery learning skill set, that was packaged up in a hurry and was released in 2020. So that was an immediate kind of response for a formal vet product to help the capability of trainers and assessors, help build that capability. But the second skill set there is brand new, and it's not released yet. So we probably should just put a big star. This information's coming from the Skills Service Organisation. Great to see the link there. So you can go and you can grab copies of these. It's easy to find on the website, on the Skills for Australia website. But you can grab copies of those units And these two units are, again, new skill set, as you can see there, online learning and assessment skill set. They are going to the AISC, the Australian Industry Skills Committee, April meeting. So it is expected that this skill set and those two new units are going to be, great job there, Rob, on the link, are going to be approved in the next 3 or 4 weeks as part of that next committee meeting, and then they'll become available. And as well as the skill set, both of those units are going into an updated TAE 40116. So for all of you who are TAE providers, I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear there's another transition coming. It'll be release 4. And both of those units are going to be electives in the updated TAE 40116. I'm not talking about the new TAE that's coming, TAE 22, all of that stuff that's going to be coming out later this year. I'm talking about an immediate change in the coming month or so.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thanks for the information, Phil. I mean, from my perspective, obviously, as an advocate of online assessment, then it's good to see that there's a recognition of the requirement of, different skills or a bit of focus just in the context of different ways that you might need to manage a process or deliver a process in kind of fulfilling kind of student outcomes that we're also keen to achieve. So that's good.
Just before you go on, Rob, let me just mention as well, sorry, I caught you there, just in the change of the titles of the units, moving from e-learning to online learning. I know that you might talk about semantics, but English words have meanings as well. Yeah. But there's some really clear messaging in here of this shift that's going on in terms of the kind of delivery and the kind of approaches that we're talking about. And that assessed competence unit, there was some significant debate. And if you want to, you can download and read the case for endorsement. The link that Rob's put in there will take you to that as well. There's some significant debate. Is this unit actually needed? We've got a unit that's called assessed competence. Why can't we just tailor that for online? And in the work that the Industry Reference Committee has done, the IRC has said, no, this is substantially different. There are essential outcomes here that need to be addressed, which is why this additional unit of competency has been designed. So for anyone that might have been thinking, well, hang on a minute, why are we not just tailoring? There is some, as we know, if we're assessing online, if you're one of assessors like myself who do it, it is quite a different kind of skill set.
Yeah, it is definitely. It's often a kind of focus point for clients we're onboarding, just consideration to that transition and who needs to do what compared to their usual role. So that's good. But I think I've got some links as well that I can put out that might be to those specific documents. Maybe we can issue the documents, the actual documents you can download through those that link for Skills for Australia that we sent out there. Okay, so what we're going to talk about here, Phil, new unit options. As you said, there's a bit of an update to the TAE to was it version 4?
Yeah, release 4 it'll be, the TAE 40116 once it's approved, with those 2 elective units included. And I think it's useful here. I just the purpose of this one, Rob, is just to call out a little bit why they're different. Like, because we have these other units, facilitate e-learning, etc. What's different about these ones? And there's a couple of key things that I pulled out in looking at a comparison of the units. The first one is a much greater focus on the planning and organising. What kind of technology are you going to be using? Let's take a step back. Before we talk about technology, who's the target group? Who's the learner cohort? What are their characteristics? The kind of stuff that you hear people talk about all the time when they're talking about training and assessment strategies, to really sort of drill in to what are those learner needs? How do we go about reflecting those needs? And then the planning and organising for that need, which includes the technology requirements. There's a lot more focus in there around what kinds of systems, what kinds of features or functionality, how you're going to be doing it. And also a very strong focus as well on the communication methods. So there's a real connection in there, which is feeding into the next point around engagement. We've all heard and we've all felt in the last 2 years, how do we boost this engagement? How do we reach out to students that were perhaps supposed to be on campus but are not anymore? And how do we make sure that they are engaged and are having a positive experience and are being supported and are getting feedback and are progressing and are going to achieve what we're trying to support them? So there's a really, really strong focus coming through in these units, much more than the previous units. Also, synchronous delivery, that live delivery is a key part. And I just want to mention a couple of things here in terms of the performance evidence. What do we have to do, mate? What do we have to do for these new units? The performance evidence for the delivery unit, a minimum of 2 live sessions, at least 40 minutes in duration each. So that sort of reflects some other TAE bits and pieces. It seems to reflect what's the free Zoom account, Rob? It drops out after 40 minutes. 45 minutes.
Damn it,
we're gonna have to buy it. What's going on there? So 2 live sessions, at least 40 minutes in length. And then you need to do 2 asynchronous activities as well, where you're supporting students, obviously, where it's not live. So that's from the facilitation. From the assessment side, you need to do a minimum of 3 candidates. And I've just got the breakdown here as well that I'm looking at. A minimum of 3 candidates, a minimum of 2 tasks. One of those has to be live. One of those is not live. So you've got some interesting, synchronous, asynchronous as well. And unfortunately, the unit keeps, this is another, even though they're brand new units, they're still using this phrase, at least one occasion, where we know that the regulator doesn't like that phrase, because at least one occasion means 2 or more, because we're talking about competency, consistent application. So I'm not sure, there's still not a message, perhaps now that ASC was taking over training product assurance from the 1st of January next year, maybe we can feed some of that knowledge into training product developers so we avoid some of these issues coming out in brand new units. Like that, we really shouldn't be seeing those kinds of challenges today. All due respect to the IRC and to the training product development team that have put those together.
Yeah, let's not upset anyone.
Exactly.
Okay, so really we're just going to go through each of these sections and kind of explore. And have I messed the slides up there? Sorry, bear with me a second.
All good.
Facilitating online.
Yeah, that's it.
Right.
So that looks like the 5 areas we want to chat about.
Yeah, there we go. So thanks, Phil. So we've got 5 areas that we're going to chat about, and then really kind of expand the discussion on each of those, and hopefully do a bit of chatting and a bit of contribution from people in the audience to kind of see how we go. So we'll open up the floor for the planning and organising piece, really. And if everyone could just share in chat or throw in chat, what are your key considerations or things that you would worry about in terms of planning and organising and getting ready for delivery in whatever requirement. And I think Phil touched on a very good point. We're on the specifics around tools and methods. Maybe we need to consider, in terms of the needs of the learners and different scenarios, how they might be different.
Yeah, Marissa's got that coming through as well. The student cohort, you really want to be in that. And we mentioned learning outcomes too as it's coming through. A good one there, Carolyn, as well, about the cohort. Karen's mentioning target audience as well. Keep dropping them in there, guys. Fabulous. So yeah, it's who are we dealing with? So for example, using a couple of the examples that we've talked about already today, are we dealing with minors? Have you got students that are under 18, or it's possible that you've got students that are under 18 because you haven't mandated an admission requirement of 18 and over? If you've got younger students and you're thinking about delivery across borders, you really need to be checking out those working with children requirements. And do you hold the cards? In some states, do you have an exemption depending on what cards you already hold? So you need to or what kind of delivery you're doing. for how long, what volume of that delivery is occurring. So you really want to have an understanding of that. Same from what are the learners' technology? Are they all going to be on phones? Have they all got big screens? So you can use small little font because they've got giant screens, or it all has to be everything should be mobile responsive these days anyway, guys. But do you really need to be conscious of that mobile responsiveness? What kinds of internet bandwidth you're going to be talking about? Do you need to worry about the cost of that? If it's something, as I mentioned before, around maybe taking stuff down into standard definition, reducing the size of images you're using, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of design stuff that you might be thinking about in there. And then, as we've mentioned in there, yes, Maret's saying there, good job, that students can't afford the IT setup, that who's actually paying for all of these bits and pieces as we go. Reasonable adjustments, a great one in there. There's this emerging area. It's not emerging, but when I say emerging in terms of thinking about closed captioning and subtitling, those two things are different. What's a subtitle? What's a closed caption? And then from there, do you or do you not use those things? Keep in mind that as education institutions, we do need to meet the requirements of the Disability Standards for Education 2005. All of us do. So there are some minimum things that we're required to be doing if we're going to meet those minimum WCAG standards. And then from there, what other kinds of reasonable adjustments might you need to be thinking about? Great one there from Sue as well. How do you manage authenticity? So we might have a situation here. Have I got it with me? I've got my dummy, where did I put it? I've got my dummy a driver's license here somewhere, where you've got the student holding the driver's license up to the screen, so you've got that photo ID and you can be authenticating. Or if they're in an LMS, how are you going about authenticating? So there's a whole range of stuff as we're throwing in there. Learning styles, another great one there, Christine. What's quality education mean? I'll pick up in there too. So what is quality? What level of quality are you aiming for in your operation? And then how do you reflect that in the student experience with technology? There's just we could talk about it for hours. There's so many things, as you guys are putting in the chat as well, that you do need to be considering before you get on with it. And that's why I think the new units have such a much greater focus on this planning and organising before we start.
Yeah, I think there's some fantastic stuff coming up in chat, but it seems to be a pretty common theme coming through in terms of technology and capabilities and just the suitability of that technology. One example we've come across springs to mind is, particularly in short courses, you can have people rock up that haven't even got an email address, or they've got a shared email address with the family and they don't know the password and whatnot. So we put in text message authentication, so you can log into Cloud Assess, you get a text message, and you just click the link in a text message and you're in on your smartphone, and it's a device that you've got in the session. And I mean, it's great for short courses where, it might be relevant to do multiple choice surveys or assessments, but I wouldn't want to be typing long form assignments in on a smartphone. So it all comes down to fitness for purpose, I think, in the different situation that you might be in.
Yeah, exactly. Maret's got a good one there. How do you incentivise participation in certain activities? Great call there from Kemp as well. Teach the tool first. So, if that example that I was giving with turning high definition off in Zoom, if you've got students that are using they're paying for their own data, maybe that's a really good way to turn off, because it will literally use only a third of the data, roughly. So it's a huge saving for something like that. And it also saves you having to then Photoshop me, because you haven't got that crystal clarity of every blemish on my face. So it's a good one from that perspective as well.
You could just hold your fake driver's license up, Phil. We'll be full about that. Exactly. The baby face on there.
Yeah, so I was saying that to someone last week, Rob, where they were talking about their Zoom background, and I'm like, can you get those things where it comes you, not behind you, it just comes you, like an outward silhouette or something? But no, they weren't on that. And then we need to get into those tools, I think. So as you mentioned there, and Kelly's got some comments there as well about establishing the online environment. We had a slide up there too. How do we we're encouraging that engagement. That might be an interesting one. Did we jump over one there, Rob?
We did, mate. Yeah, we did. Yeah. Good
Just
spot.
quickly call out anyone. Juliana that's a great example there with Kahoot. If you've got a key idea about how you're engaging with your students, just drop it in the chat now. What tips have you got to help us engage? I'll give you a quick story from this week. I've just helped a provider go online this year with the start of semester. And I had that issue that you were just mentioning, Rob, where for the first time, where students do or don't have email addresses, or they're using their parents' address, or they've forgotten their address, all of that kind of stuff. So for the first time, the provider's actually issued students with a provider email address. So it's almost like you've gone to a major provider and you get your own student email that all of the systems are then connected to. That's frustrating for individuals as well. So there's lots of downsides to that, but that's the approach that they did. And then they went live, what's today, Wednesday? So they went live on Monday. And I was talking to one of the teachers Monday afternoon, and they said, everyone's friending me in the LMS. There's this thing where they friend me. I'm like, they've got a digital learning environment that supports that. And they said to me, how do I turn it off? I'm like, hang on a minute. There's something we're lost in translation here somewhere. We're not trying to turn off engagement. We're trying to encourage engagement. So sometimes there's still some attitudinal things that we just need to second guess and think about as educators, that even though we might not want every one of our students to friend us, that's actually helping build that rapport and engagement and relationships and ways to communicate that we're going to want later in the semester when those students stop turning up to things that we want them to be participating in. Yeah,
and there were certainly some comments in one of the online reviews about best practice involving, not just depending on your system, but, phoning people up. I mean, you can keep notes in your system, I'm sure, about contact with the learners, but, give them a call if they're disengaged, or, you might be able to have a report on who has and hasn't logged in within the last month, and, give people a call and make sure they're engaged in the process, or direct message them through the solution if you can do that. There's more than one way to solve the problem, I think. It doesn't have to be one-dimensional.
Yeah, exactly. Natalie's mentioning Kahoot as well. Kahoot's a fabulous solution, Beck. I'm a huge fan of Slido as well. I use Slido for lots of different sessions, conferences, physical classroom sessions. I use Slido. It's just a fantastic engagement tool. Takes a little bit of time, like 30 seconds to get set up and running, but it really brings people out who might be sitting in the back of the room and not participating. Facilitating, and we're talking about tools, so that's a brilliant segue, Rob. Do we want to try and get everyone to put their favourite tool in the chat?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. Let's see how many different solutions we can get confused by. I'm starting to feel more and more like my parents with the VCR these days. There's that much stuff kicking around and that much stuff out there. But yeah, Slido seems to be a common solution.
Great one there, Vanessa, on Google Meet. I actually used Google Meet last week for the first time in a while. And I actually personally, I find it easier and better and faster and more attractive than Zoom or Teams. The challenge with Google Meet, though, is that everyone's got to have their Gmail. So you do bump into people that don't like Google or don't use Gmail or don't have a Gmail, and that creates you can get a link thing going on, but it creates just that little bit more challenge than just a link and off you go. Great stuff going in here where Kahoot's coming up again. One tool that I'll call out that I haven't seen come through yet, that the fabulous Kerry Buttery got me onto about 18 months ago, is a tool called Loom, Loom. So if you're doing any kind of video training or video messages for students, you've got things like Zoom, obviously, that we're doing now, but Loom, Loom, allows you to record videos with a trainer head, and there's a whole range of features. Good one, Juliana, yeah. And I just find it's so easy to use, and it's just beautiful. It creates really, really attractive sort of presentations with video, with options that you don't have with things like Zoom. You don't have a lot of control over. Even just something simple as saying, do you want the trainer head to be circle or square? I found out that this looks better in a circle. You know, who knew? But when you poll people, they're like, "Oh yes, we prefer you in a circle." Well, it's like, okay, I'll run with circle. So, whatever you could do to keep the punters happy, you know what I'm saying. If you want them to come back and progress through their course, you'll do pretty much anything to get them to the end.
Yeah, mate. If the biggest gripe is that you're mounted in a square rather than a circle, I reckon you're doing a pretty good job, to be honest. But,
it takes all types. Takes all types.
That's good.
So great tools in there. Good job, guys. So good to see the word pedagogy pop up in the chat too. That's a great call out that we just need to keep coming back to what we're trying to achieve. What is this delivery approach for the people that we're working with?
Yeah. And Alan Gill's just asked, do these fit into Cloud Assess? Well, yes, it just depends where and how you want to use them. So, you know, you might create an event and just put a link to a tool for a discussion board, or you might use your course posts just to share some dialogue around, you know, a Slido board or something like that. So a range of different ways, or sharing links with one-to-one messages. Or you could have a Slido link that just sits in a resource permanently that you might use each time you go in the session. So plenty of different ways or angles you can use the solution. Just it comes down to use case and the context of how you want to roll, I guess. Yeah,
Diane there's mentioned as well, Canva. Canva is just a fabulous tool, and there's a reason it's the fastest growing tech company in history in terms of a revenue, in terms of valuation perspective. It's taken over the world. It's an amazing tool, and it just keeps bolting more and more stuff into it. Padlet's also another great one. Gee, there's some fantastic in there, Rob. We could be looking at that all day.
Yeah, we're going to have to move on, mate. We've got 2 more slides before the Q&A, and we've got 4 minutes to get there. So I think it's been blown me away how much people are sharing in chat today. So I'll make sure the transcript is shared as a function of sharing this stuff out, because there's some great stuff coming in there, and it just seems to be off the page before you know it. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Providing support, Phil. What's best practice from your perspective? What's some standout examples that you might have come across while the audience can chuck in an answer to the same question, I guess?
Yeah. Supporting online is a real key one. A good call out there from Gordon as well, coming back to the records. I'll just quickly mention electronic signatures, just while we're talking about records, that electronic signatures, you can't cut and paste some image of your signature. You shouldn't be doing that. That's pretty much not allowed anywhere. If you're using electronic signatures, there's an Electronic Transactions Act in the Commonwealth, and then it's harmonised in all states and territories. So you've got Electronic Transactions Act requirements that you need to meet, and there's a whole range of obligations around identity, consent, authenticity of the records, etc., etc. So pretty much everyone's using electronic signatures now, and as I mentioned, most providers that I'm seeing are using them incorrectly, not finding it getting caught too much yet at audit, because people are not really thinking about, like, it's an emerging issue. We're still coming out of the challenge of the last 2 years, but you really want to make sure if you're using electronic signatures, you've got a policy, procedures, and you're meeting all the requirements of the Electronic Transactions Act. I think that's going to be something that starts coming up in audits in the next couple of years. Just quickly, I have seen 3 states, ACT, Victoria and Queensland, issue guidelines for RTOs, particularly for subsidised RTOs, around the use of electronic signatures. So really something, if you're doing it, you need to get yourself across. In terms of providing support, as many ways as possible. So I love, if we think about the vetr portal, if I can just talk about our vetr portal for a moment, we have a next generation digital learning solution, and it allows us to message students. We've got a chat function. We can do video calls. We can do announcements. We can automate messages to individuals or to groups of students. There's just so many ways that you can go about communicating and connecting with students. I've seen some of the work from, again, fabulous Dr. Denise Cox, if you've come across Dr. Denise, teachingonline.com.au, and she talks about just something as simple as your online profile. What's your profile look like on Facebook? What does your profile look like on LinkedIn? What does your profile look like in the LMS? Does your LMS even have profiles? If it does, it should do, then what does it look like? Because her research is showing, and yes, if you've got students, they're checking you out on Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm sorry if you didn't realize that they are doing that. So her research is showing that the way that you're writing your profile is having an impact on whether the students feel that you're approachable and can get support and engagement from you. There's a whole range of stuff that you should be thinking about. The key in any, regardless of how you're doing the support, the phone, as Rob was mentioning before in the chat as well, however you're doing the support, it needs to be timely and often. So I think the key message there is that just you almost can't over communicate. And again, your digital tools might give learners options to cut down the number of emails or the number of messages or whatever if they want to, but you almost want to err on the side of over communicating, not under communicating, to really make sure that students know that you're there, are getting that feedback, support, engagement from you, and know where to find the support.
I think an important thing to think of as well is, we're probably all come through a period where, we used to deliver face-to-face and in a face-to-face environment. And it's obvious if you've got a learner that's not engaged or what have you in the class, and you'd, have a chat during the break and see how they're going and find out if there's anything going on. But you've got to scratch a bit harder beneath the surface in a digital environment and maybe look for a report for people who haven't logged in, or look for different triggers or events that might be occurring to show that perhaps they're not as engaged. And really, depending on which system you've got to use or you are using, you probably need to have a think about how you identify those issues and different strategies that you might adopt to actually, build a bridge, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then last one, and we've got 3 minutes to get this in and get onto the Q&A. If we've got people are you available to hang around for 5 minutes after Phill to?
Yeah. My apologies, I'm talking too much, but I'm happy to do another 10 or 15 minutes if there's people with particular questions. Happy. Yeah,
that's great. So last one, perhaps improvement plans. How do we facilitate that in an online context? Do you want to perhaps expand on that, Phill? Sorry.
Yeah, no, definitely. Sorry, I was just looking at Alan's comment there. To have video on or off, again, that's just such a great challenge at the moment, and research being done around that, what students' preferences and expectations are. So I think a whole range of these areas, we're sort of still learning as we go a little bit. There's truckloads, don't get me wrong, there's truckloads of evidence-based research about how to do digital learning well, including showing that digital learning is more effective than any other kind of learning ever. So who would have thought the TV took over the world? Mass media marketing that's created our consumer society. Who would have thought that video and digital activity would have changed the world? But it has. But there's still a lot of these areas that are progressively being researched for particular target groups and particular kinds of challenges with the latest technology. In terms of improvement plans, we do need to keep in mind we're now in the era of self-assurance. We are required to self-assure or quality assure, which means that we have confidence in our operations, that we're meeting minimum legal requirements, that we're achieving a quality level. And then from there, that we also have to continuously improve. And that has been written into the initial definition that the regulators released of self-assurance. So we do need to be building into our delivery. We obviously review our delivery as we've been doing for centuries, but we need to build a bit of a digital component into that as well. How did our students find the tools? What kind of satisfaction levels? What kinds of challenges they might be having from a digital perspective? as part of our delivery as well. So we do want to be capturing those improvements, even if they're not issues, we can always be improving.
Yeah.
And then building in those plans so that we're progressively updating. Anyone who's got an LMS that they've been sitting in for sort of 10 years and you've not changed or managed that, you might be finding that you don't have some of the latest features or functions or things that you should have. So even things like the LMS technology, I know that technology can be sticky. Everyone learns how to use it and we love it and we just leave it there. But we do need to try and make sure and review on an ongoing basis that we are using an appropriate level of technology for what we're trying to achieve.
Thanks, Phil. I'm just going to say people might be up against the clock now and have to leave the session. So thanks for coming along today and joining us. We will be sending out all the content, whether it's the transcript, the presentation, a link to the video, etc. And as said at the start, if you would like your badge or certificate of attendance, please answer the survey that we send out and let us know so we can send that through to you. I'll thank you for coming along, and thanks, Phil, before anyone leaves. A fountain of knowledge as always, and we'll carry on with the Q&A session. If anyone's got any specific questions that they'd like to throw at myself or Phil, I'll probably throw them at Phil first, to be fair. But if anyone's got any questions, feel free to throw them in chat, and we'll deal with that as we go.
There's a couple in here that I'll just mention quickly, and do throw them in. I can see lots of stuff coming in. If I'm missing them as I go, my apologies, and I'll try and talk quickly. But that's a good call there again from Kemp around integration. So he's mentioning Moodle, LMS and Teams. Most of the modern platforms now are integrating much, much more effectively. And that integration process takes a little bit of time, but it's removing pain. So we're going just to one place and all the links are in the right spot and you click on stuff and it just works. And we don't have to be worried about bits and pieces across all of our students. So integration and automation are really, really important, really powerful. Great question there from Ignatius around supporting learning disabilities, physical and mental, with limited time. Video is a really great example of that. I've got people, well, I do a lot of video sessions, as Rob was sort of alluding to at the start. I do video a lot. I seem to be better in video than in real life. I'm not sure if anyone wants to agree with that, if you've met me in person. But I have people telling me, we love looking at your videos because we can go 1.5. And they say, if you think you talk fast in a normal session, you should see you on 1.5. So I have students sort of speeding me up. But then I have other situations where they'll say, oh, actually, I can slow it down. So when you've got students with different preferences or different levels of ability, before we even start talking about disabilities, video is a great one where we can chunk it up. Instead of having to attend a 50-minute session and concentrate for 50 minutes, I can actually take a video and watch one part of it just on one discrete topic. Today's session, we've covered six key topics. So I can do 10 minutes instead of having to sit and concentrate for 60 minutes. And then I can go back and watch it again, like all the stuff that I wish I had when I was at university, attending lectures and having to write all the notes really quickly so I can remember what the dudes were saying. So the technology isn't limiting your ability to support students with disabilities or to support students, all various preferences. It's actually unleashing a whole range of new options for you to support student preferences. So really, really useful there.
Just got a question from Josie, Phil. So when are we required to upgrade to TAE 40116?
That keeps coming up. If you're on my live show last week, it came up on my live show as well. In the vetr portal. So the TAE 22, this is worth just quickly, a couple of things. If you're currently operating on TAE 10, with a couple of extra units, if you're operating on TAE 410, please do yourself a favour and upgrade right now. You need to get your upgrade done. If you're like me and you came in on BSZ 40198, it was equivalent for TAE 04. It wasn't equivalent for TAE 10. So people that were 2 behind, they all had to do the whole thing again. If you're operating on 04, it was equivalent for TAE 10, it wasn't equivalent for 16. So if you're operating 2 behind, they had to do it all again. If you're on TAE 10 it's equivalent to TAE 16, but when TAE 22 comes out, I've got no idea. But if it's the same as it has been for the last 3 times, I can go right back to Train the Trainer in early 90s, you're going to have to do the entire thing again if it's the same as the last 3 times that that's happened. In terms of the requirement to upgrade, the Industry Reference Committee has said that they're going to recommend no, that we shouldn't all have to upgrade. That was also the recommendation when 16 came out, just mentioned. So they don't get the say on what the requirement is. The standards say what the credential is that we need to hold. And we do have new standards coming out as well that the government said would be released in the first quarter of 2022. So I haven't seen it today. I'm wondering, Rob, maybe tomorrow, or if not, surprise, the Commonwealth's behind schedule. But we do have new standards coming out, and those standards will no doubt give us a new view on what the trainer and assessor credential is that we need to hold. So hopefully that's been useful.
Yep. Interesting question from Sandra there. What's your opinion of an assessor getting involved in role plays with students?
Well, that's a really good one. That's a really good question. It's contextual to what the unit of competency is. So there's some units of competency that say that there can be assistance provided. Other units of competency say where that's not the case. Your assessment tool should be saying whether assistance can be provided or not. Depending on the unit of competency, the assessor might be undertaking a particular role. So that as part of the role play. In other units of competency, they shouldn't be. So it really does depend on the context of the unit of competency that you're talking about. Just that question there from Andrew. I'm about 80 messages behind in the chat. Upgrade going to affect diploma qualifications, same answer. It's the standards that will say what the trainer and assessor credential is and what diplomas can do or can't do. Keep in mind at the moment, diplomas can't validate. You have to have a Cert 4 or an assessor skill set to validate. So if you're operating, I've got a couple of diplomas. If you're operating on a diploma, unfortunately, you still need to do your Cert 4 if you want to be a validator. So it's a bit of a quirk in the current standards. That might get fixed in the new standards, who knows? What else have we got there, Rob? Any other questions? I'm just quickly trying to spot any others.
Well, I was just about to stick your vetr link in for that PD, just to remind everyone of that link there for your PD series. So I'll just drop that in the chat again.
Good question there, Nicole. Surely not if you've got the validation unit in the diploma. Unfortunately, the standards are very clear. Diploma is not one of the, it's crazy, isn't it? They haven't fixed that. How long have the standards been out? 7 years. The diploma is not one of the credentials that you can use if you want to sign off on validations. So it's a bit of a quirk in the exactly as Nicole mentions, you can teach it, but you can't do it. Exactly. Yeah, literally, because it's the standards that say what the credentials are for each of the activities that are required to be undertaken in the standards. Yeah, so bit of a weird compliancy one there, but something that we see a few providers getting tripped up on where they're operating with, where they've got people operating with diplomas only or bachelors of adult and vocational education, and then they're running around doing their validations. Yeah. Okay, well, good. I'm not sure if we covered all the questions there, Rob.
Mate, I think we're pretty much there. I've got a couple of questions come through about if people can watch this, because they didn't get a chance to get through it all and got distracted in one way or another. So, yeah, as said at the start, video will be going out, or a link to the video. We'll share files, we'll share the presentation, so you can watch and review at your leisure. And if you'd like a certificate of attendance, then please let us know through the survey that gets distributed via email after the session. So, I'll conducting online assessment process in new unit. Is there requirements for this to be assessed against unit of competency?
Yes, yeah. So it is a vet product that you want to be using. Yes, exactly. That's a good question, Marissa. But very similar to other TAE products, it's units of competency that need to be getting used as part of that process. Yeah, good one.
That's good. Mate, I'll start wrapping up. I think really we're nearly 10 minutes over. There's I'm sure everyone needs to move on to the next appointment and look busy for a bit longer before the day's out. So I'll thank everyone for coming along today. Really good session, really good turnout. So I'm really pleased with that. Phill, thanks again. I think I've said thank you about 8 times now for coming along. Thanks, mate. Great to see you. Great to share some experiences and get some of your insight. Always a pleasure. If anyone's got any more questions, how can they get in touch with you, Phill? Is it your Facebook profile that you suggested?
No, I'm a bit quiet on Facebook, but if you hit me on linkedin.com/Phill Bevan, my own name. Yes, you can connect with me LinkedIn and message me up, no trouble at all. Or in the vetr community, anything that you want a bit of help with, info@vetr.com.au. Thanks so much, Rob, for having me. Always a pleasure to come and chat with you guys. And yeah, a really enjoyable session.
Yeah, it's been good fun, mate. Thanks for coming. Thanks for everyone to everyone for turning up and making it a great session. So we'll be in touch soon with what's next.
Good stuff. Take care, everyone.
Thanks. Bye now.